Hold your horses. All right. See, I can lift that bench. I went to the gym like 3 weeks ago. It really did something for me. I got a protein shake like 3 months ago. Feeling good. All right. Actually, this morning my cheeks were hurting. I was laughing so much before service even started. We really like to have some fun here, and certainly take serious the word, but definitely like to have some fun. If you have a Bible, we're going to be in John chapter 2. If you don't have a Bible, there should be one in the seat back in front of you. If you downloaded the Awaken 514 app, there's a Bible tab on there. You're certainly welcome to follow along on your phone. We're in John chapter 2. We've been in John 1 for, 6-8 weeks. I think we're going to get through chapter 2 in like 3, so that's not too bad. We're making progress. I could be lying to you there, though. I got to double check the outline, but don't quote me on that. But today we look at a pretty popular story in the church, at least, or at least people know the story enough to reference it. Right? Jesus is going to go to a wedding, and Jesus is going to turn water to wine. Okay, let us pray. We can get out of here now. Right? I mean, that's all we need to know. Jesus turned water to wine, right? And he didn't just turn it into wine, he turned it abundant wine. Like, there's going to be a lot of wine produced today. And it's not only okay wine, like none of that box stuff. It's like really good wine, like that expensive stuff. You have to, pay for a bottle. It comes in a glass bottle. It's got a cork in it, like good wine, not that box stuff. So we got quite the story in front of us. So I'm going to dive right in as soon as we can. But before we do, I want to lay some groundwork for you as to where we've been and what's been going on. The last handful of weeks, we've seen Jesus start calling some of his disciples, right? Beginning of this biography, the biographer John has given us some context about how they all came to be. And at this point, what we've seen is Jesus has now collected about 5 of his disciples, and he's collected these guys kind of in his home region in northern Galilee. And in northern Galilee, all these guys kind of would have probably known each other. Like, we're talking small rural communities, right? Y'all can't in any way relate with that, right? You don't know everybody or are half related to half the room, right? One way or another, your family tree is going to date back to someone, right? So at the end of the day, like, this is the way these communities were built. He's going to be at this wedding in a town called Cana. Cana has between 300 and 500 people, real small community, right? Think like for you, right? If you're local, think Grampian probably. And these were most of which self-sustaining. They traded with other local villages, but for the most part, right, they were kind of self-sustaining. You had your baker and your different farmers farming different types of, and so everybody kind of knows everybody. And Jesus begins calling his disciples from these spheres of influence. Now, we're never told that they knew Jesus ahead of time, but there's probably a really good chance that they had come across each other. And so he's begun calling his early disciples. And at this point, we know at least he's got 5 of these guys with him. Some of his 3 of these 5 guys are going to become his inner circle, right? When he eventually has the 12, he's got 3 guys that he spends a good amount of alone time with. They become his real inner circle. And so John's going to pick the story up right there. And that's a couple days later, a wedding happens. Now, we'll look at why that is in the timeline, but let's just open the book and we'll take a look at it. John chapter 2 is where we're going to be. On the 3rd day, there was a wedding at Cana in Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus also was invited to the wedding with his disciples. Okay, so this isn't that crazy. They invited Jesus and were like, hey, bring your posse with you. No, they probably all knew this region in Cana was about 8-9 miles from Nazareth where Jesus grew up, right? So there's a good chance there's some interrelation here. There's some cousin, relative, friend of the family, right? A lot of these guys kind of intermingled, and we find out that there's this wedding that happened. Now, it seems a little convenient to me as I'm reading the story that this wedding just so happened to happen a few days after Jesus finishes calling his disciples. But it's not that surprising when you understand their culture. Ancient Hebrew culture had a very interesting wedding, marriage, betrothal, engagement type culture. So what we find out is that oftentimes marriages were arranged, and if they weren't arranged, it was pretty well, like you knew each other, right? Like you didn't have this huge dating pool. There were no online apps. Like you grew up in a town of 300 to 500 people, like you kind of knew each other, right? So what would happen is you were betrothed, and then after your actual betrothal, right, after the, let's call it the engagement, this was a legally binding relationship. You didn't have to get married for it to be legally binding. And we know that because in the story, when Jesus is born, right, we find out that Joseph, right, is going to quietly divorce Mary, who he's betrothed to, when he finds out she's pregnant, right? We know that story. If you round at Christmas, you've probably heard that story, right? You know when your girl comes to you and says, hey, I'm pregnant, and you're like, it ain't mine. I know, because we've not been married yet. And she's like, it's God's baby. You know there's some shady stuff going on, right? Joseph wasn't quite sure what to make of this, right? Until he has an appearance. One of the angels comes to him and says, no, she's telling the truth. Like, this is legit, right? Nothing shady's going on here. But before that happens, Joseph, a man of honor, wants to preserve her dignity and just divorce her quietly. So we know part of the history here reveals to us that a betrothal was a legally binding marriage in their culture. But you didn't just move right in together. What would happen in this culture is they would, the husband, after they were betrothed, would go back to his home, to his hometown, and he would work for about a year, maybe a little bit longer than a year, to prepare, not for just the wedding, he's preparing for that, but for the marriage, right? And a lot of what this meant was he was building onto his parents' house. He was going to build a room on, he was going to build an extension on, he was going to prepare to bring his bride home so he could prepare to make sure that he could protect for her and he could provide for her, right? So this whole year was about preparation, right? And then, when he was ready, he would come and get his bride. But he wouldn't just send her a text and be like, hey, let's set a date, right? That wasn't the way it worked. You didn't go online, you didn't send out invites, right? What he would do is he would create this kind of parade procession with his family and his friends, and they would parade back to wherever the bride was at her father's house, right? And it was oftentimes at night, and it was the time that the wedding was going to happen. And so the parade would be singing songs and making music, and he would maybe be riding in, and they'd have torches, and it'd be this big celebration. It'd be all ready. They'd be cheering in the streets. They'd be all excited. And then he would come and get his bride, and they would celebrate and have the wedding. So there was no like save the dates going out. Like she didn't even know when he was coming back. Like, again, there was no text messages like, hey, baby, I'm coming next week. Like, it wasn't happening like that, right? And so he comes in, she's surprised. Jesus is going to tell some parables about this, and I think it's Matthew 25. He talks about the bride. He tells a parable about the bridegroom going away and then coming back and the brides being ready for him. There were 10 women, and 5 of them were not prepared. 5 of them were prepared for the wedding feast, and it's obviously a parable of Jesus returning. But again, we get some cultural significance here. The bridegroom comes back, there's a celebration, there's a parade, and then this jam would last for like a week. Like, it wasn't just a few hour event. Like, this was a big party. Now, this didn't happen often. Let's just put it that way. Like, we're talking about impoverished, rural, ancient culture. They didn't have like an organization downtown that's whole job was to like beautify downtown and make it feel like a cool community by doing riverfront festivals and celebrations and concerts in the park. Like, entertainment was sparse. It was hard to come by in their culture. So when a wedding would happen, like, this was a big ordeal, and it was an ordeal that involved the entire community. Yes, it was about the bridegroom and his bride. It was about the husband and the wife getting married. They had a hugely sacred understanding of the marriage covenant and what was taking place. And they would be treated like a king and a queen. They would be celebrated like you would not believe. But it was also an invitation for the community to be a part of this communal celebration. It wasn't like Bridezilla's, like it's all about me. Like, no, it was about everybody in the community partaking of this enjoyment and this celebration. So weddings weren't a dime a dozen. Like, the last couple of years, and I'm stoked about this, I'm not complaining. I've had to do last summer, I think it was like every other weekend I was at a wedding. It was awesome. Some of y'all got to see me dance. I'm not Baptist, man, I dance, all right? But at the end of the day, like, we have like all summer long. I mean, my summer is already booking up. Like, I've got, this month alone, I think I've got 2 weddings, right? We have a lot of young people. We've got a bigger community, right? There's more people. And so weddings are not that infrequent, that uncommon, again, because we're small enough that many of you all see at the same weddings because there's an interconnectedness. When you've got 300 to 500 people, there's only so many people of marrying age. There's only so many people that are going to get married. And so these were not regular events. And so this was like, let's go, right? But let's have a celebration. Now, unlike our culture, where typically the bride's family will be responsible for covering the wedding. I know sometimes that, we're in 2025, that's not always the case, but in their culture, it was strictly on the husband to spend that year in preparation, not, again, to get ready for the celebration, but to get ready for the life of marriage together. Now, this was incredibly important because it was in their culture, it was a distinction that the husband was ready and prepared to provide for his future bride. If the celebration did not go off without a hitch, or it went off without a hitch, or there was any issues, then it would be a stain against his, let's call it his masculinity, his ability to be a husband, to protect and provide for his wife. It would be a cultural and social stain against him. Now, we kind of bristle at that. We live in a day and age where if anything puts any kind of external pressure on us, we feel the need to rebel out from under it, right? If somebody says no elbows on it, like it's culturally unacceptable to put elbows on the table, we're like, oh, I'm gonna put my elbows on the table. Nobody tell me what to do, right? Like we have this bit of like rebellious spirit. We don't like anything externally to pressure us into being or having to do anything, right? I mean, I could give you a ton of cultural examples, but it just feels like every outside pressure is robbing me of my freedom to express myself in any way I want. You can't put me in a box no matter what you try to do, right? That's kind of how we live. That's kind of the air we breathe. But there are some cultural pressures, I think, that help shape and mold us, right? Shame, although in most cases is going to be a bit of a negative weapon formed against us, there are places where cultural pressure can help, especially for young men, mold them into men, right? Without it, right, we wind up at like 50 without a job and mastering nothing but video games, right? I'm not saying you can't master video games, but nothing but, right? All we do is Fortnite at 50 years old, yelling at like 13-year-olds, like, ha, you stink, right? Like there's a problem, right? Something's gone wrong. When you haven't taken responsibility, gotten a job, learned to protect, learned to provide, and actually evolved into a man, right? So we sometimes use these pressures, right? You see coaches do it when they're coaching kids. Like sometimes like, oh, that coach is mean. No, that coach is helping to shape responsibility in your young man. And so this is the pressures that we saw in the culture back then, was that this was a way in which as he stepped into the most important relationship he would have on this side of heaven, he was being shaped under the cultural pressure to make sure he was ready to properly care for his bride. Okay, so that sets the stage for the problem that's about to happen. Let's keep reading. So verse 3, chapter 2, verse 3. When the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, they have no wine. Now, I'm going to be quick here. I don't want to take too much time, but a couple things happen. First, we find out the wine runs out. Huge problem. He did not properly plan for this wedding. Either everybody's having a better time than he expected, they're drinking a little more than he expected, or more guests showed up, or maybe they were just impoverished and like this is what he could afford, right? We're not sure. But in this culture, something like this goes bad. It wasn't just a social stain. It absolutely was. Like this could hurt his social credibility for literally decades. Some of you get that. Like rural America, one of the interesting things for me, I have this interesting purview, having grown up in North Jersey and then getting to live here, love being here. But one of the interesting dynamics here is that in North Jersey, like there's so many people you can get lost. Easily get lost. Imagine growing up in Pittsburgh. Like it's easy to get lost, not see your high school friends again, not be reminded of that stupid thing you did at a high school party, right? There's a way in which you can kind of reinvent yourself. Social media makes it a little harder, but you can still reinvent yourself. In rural America, where everybody knows you and remembers who you used to be, sometimes it can be a little harder trying to reinvent yourself. Like you come to know Jesus and people are like, I remember who you used to be, right? And that's a hard stigma to overcome, right? Amplify that now in a culture in which this celebration is the celebration. It is everything. There's no 4th of July fireworks to look forward to, and then a cookout on Memorial Day. Like this is it. You had one shot and you blew it. You could also, though, get sued. And some of y'all are like, yes, they ran out of beer at the wedding. I'm suing somebody. I'm taking it to the local magistrate. You ruined my night, right? You invited me to your party. You ran out of beer. That's not acceptable, right? Some of you were like, yes, but you could actually be sued in this situation. So this is, for this couple, specifically for this man, this is a problem. This is a problem, okay? Now, I don't know why Jesus' mother is involved. Not sure. Maybe she's related to the groom's side of the family. Not sure. They don't tell us. The Bible doesn't tell us. I'm not going to speculate. But here's what she does. She goes to Jesus. Now, at this point in time, historians believe Jesus' father had already died. Okay, we know that he was alive when Jesus was about 12. At this point, Jesus is about 30. At some point, we're never told, but the assumption is, the understanding is that his father had died, right? And so Jesus would have become the man of the household. He would have been responsible to provide for his mother and his siblings. And so it's very possible she just goes to Jesus because that's the one she would have learned to rely on in that culture. It was not a culture where like you could be a strong, independent woman and go out and get your own job and make your own way. Like she would have had to rely on her son's strength in a farming culture, in a physical labor culture. This would have just been very culturally natural for her. And so it's very possible that's why she went to him. But she does something interesting. She infers. Have you ever been on the receiving end of a woman inferring something? Garbage is full. I'm just going to help you today and teach you to speak woman. It means take it out. Your room is a mess. What is she saying? She's not making a blank observation. I'm like, it is. No, she's saying clean it up. Have you ever been on the receiving end of a woman inferring something? Amen, right? Like, you know, she's inferring you need to do something about this problem, right? Fair? Okay. Hey, we'll get to the men in a minute. They pout. We're going to get to pouting in a minute. Don't you worry. They infer. I'm just helping you speak woman because they are speaking clearly, but then half the time we wonder why men and women are having problems communicating. We're like, you didn't tell me to take out the trash. She's like, I've said it 4 times. When I inferred, that garbage is overflowing and there's wrappers falling out of the garbage. Take it out, right? Okay. So she infers they have no wine. Now watch Jesus' response. Jesus said to her, woman, man, I'm done. I'm going to get in trouble today. I'm out. Woman, what does this have to do with me? For my hour has not yet come. And his mother said to the servants, do whatever he tells you. Okay. Now, I don't know about you. If I ever said woman to my mother, I would be missing teeth. I'd rather pick a fight with a dude in a bar than my 5'3" mom who grew up in Yonkers, New York. I'm just telling you right now, I'm far more scared of her than I am my father. Just saying. She's in the room today. She's out from Jersey visiting. I'm just saying. You don't mess with Grandma Dukes. You just don't. She will knock your block off, right? So here's what I know. Something else is going on here, right? Right? Something else has to be, because here's what I know about Jesus. He was sinless, and it made it into the top 10 of the commandments to honor your mother and your father. So what's going on here? This is a term that we use a little differently than they do, right? This is more like ma'am. So it's a sign of respect when he responds to her, but there's something interesting about this show of respect, because I don't, maybe certain Southern cultures might refer to their mother as ma'am, yes ma'am, no ma'am, right? That may be something that grew up, but there's something going on in the culture here when Jesus responds, and what's happening is he's distancing himself from her relationally. So this is what's really interesting about this dialogue. Jesus says, literally translated, this isn't my problem. Your concern is no longer my concern. So it's a very respectful way of saying this, but what he's saying is what she wants of him, her authority over him as her mother to influence his decisions and his will, is now being broken. And this relationship between Mary and Jesus is now changing from a mother to Jesus Messiah. Multiple times now, we're going to see Jesus in chapters 4 and chapters 5 and in chapter 6 when we eventually get there in like 25 weeks. We're going to eventually see Jesus is going to say multiple times that I do the will of my Father. I am not going to be influenced by the will of anybody else. I'm not going to be peer pressured even by my mother, right? Some of us, we grew up in homes and families where even into our adulthood, we're getting a lot of guilt and shame and manipulation from some of those relatives that we have in our lives. And they continue to push and they continue to manipulate and they continue to pressure using some of these like guilt and shame tactics, right? And so if you've grown up in those environments, you can feel like sometimes that what you know is the right thing to do, or what you feel like is a better boundary to create, is being pushed back because this relative is trying to have authority over the situation and dictate how you function, right? And so Jesus here, not that he has an unhealthy dynamic with his mother, but Jesus here is saying, from this day forward, I need you to understand. It's a loving, kind, gentle rebuke. From this day forward, I need you to understand that I do the will of my Father, and I do only what my Father wills me to do, right? This term woman is going to be the same term at the end of the book when Jesus is on the cross and Mary's there weeping, and John, who our biographer here, our writer, is with her, and he looks at her and he says, "Woman, behold your son." He's going, "John, I need you to take care of her for me. I need you to look after her for me. But from this day forward, I will not be under her authority. I will not be under her will. Her concerns, if they do not align with God's desire, are not going to be my concerns. I must do the will of my Father." Now, here's what's interesting. Jesus is going to respond anyway. That does not mean, in my opinion, I'm telling you what I think is going on here in the next verses. I don't think it's because he later felt bad that he said this and put that barrier up, that boundary up, and said, "Hey, I'm now going to do my Father's will." And he's like, "I was a little harsh on my mom." No. I think what we can infer from this is that the will of God was that Jesus responded as Mary had inferred. Look at verse 6. Now, there were six stone water jars there for the Jewish rites of purification. Don't lose sight of that. We're coming back to it. Each holding 20 or 30 gallons. This would be of water. And Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." And they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the feast." So they took it. When the master of the feast tasted the water, now become wine, and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the master of the feast called the bridegroom, and he said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and when people have drunk freely, then the poor wine. But you have kept the good wine until now." This, the first of the signs that Jesus did at Cana in Galilee, had manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. After this, they went down to Capernaum with his mother and his brothers and his disciples, and they stayed there for a few days. Okay, so Jesus jumps into action. He says, "Hey, there's some purification jars. I need you to fill those all the way up to the brim." Fascinating little detail that John records. What he's trying to tell the reader is there's no trickery going on here. It's not like he dumped some water. They were half full and Jesus dumped in wine while nobody was paying attention. They were filled to the brim with water, completely filled. There's no trickery going on here. And then they draw the water, bring it to the master of feast. It's like your wedding caterer, your wedding host, whatever they call them nowadays, wedding planner, whoever's in charge of the ceremonies and making sure everything's going off the way it should, right? They bring it to me. He's like, "Oh my goodness, this is the best wine I've tasted," right? And he makes an interesting cultural observation, right? They would serve the good wine first, and then when you drank your fill, serve the box wine. Ain't nobody could tell the difference anyway at that point, right? And so he's baffled. He's like, "We already had good wine, and this is even better." And we find out a couple of details here. First, 20 to 30 gallon stone pots. These are purification jars. He did not refill the old wine jars. He refills the purification jars. Coming back to that detail later, don't forget it. And then he fills it to abundance. 20 to 30 gallons. Now, there's some interesting things going on with the culture's relationship with wine. Water was not readily available on tap. And even though you're from Clearfield and you have water readily available on tap, you still might not want to drink it. But they usually, what they did was dilute their water, or I should say dilute their wine with water. It would help purify the water, and they were not in a habit of drinking regular wine. Now, when we think wine, we think 13, 14%. Their wine was more like 7, 8, 9%, okay? It wasn't quite as potent as whatever modern mad scientist stuff we do today. On the other side of it, they would then water it down and cut it by about 2 to 3, or 2 to 1, 3 to 1, or 5 to 1 water to wine, right? So highly diluted, think probably 2 to 3% alcohol content in their wine. So the idea for the Jewish people was that they did not want to stumble into drunkenness. They wanted it to gladden their hearts. I'll let you interpret what that means. But they didn't want to stumble into drunkenness with too strong of wine. Now, at a celebration like this, they might be a little bit more open to this, and it might be a 2 or 3 to 1 cut of the wine. But they would still have different qualities and levels of wine. So it may be stronger. We're not sure what he means by good wine. It may just be more quality wine. But what we can agree on, what we can know is that 36-gallon jars is a lot of stinking wine. Let me just put it in modern context. That's about 8 to 12 kegs of probably light beer. It'll taste better, but I'm just saying, right? Modern alcohol content. And so this is a wild, wild thing that Jesus does. So a couple of things I don't have time to touch on. One, the relationship that Christians have with alcohol, okay? Because I do not have time for this today, it was a nice little rabbit trail I thought about going on and then decided I really don't have time to do it justice. Here's what I did for you this week. I wrote a blog about it. I wrote a whole article for you. If you scan a QR code, it'll take you to our website. You can hit the drop-down menu and find our blog. It's like there's only 2 articles up there because this is still a new practice for us. But I want to encourage you not to go, I'll wait till it comes out on video. Go read it, please. This is one of the areas we have an opportunity to glorify Jesus in when interacted with properly. And it's one of the areas where we look more like the culture whose relationship with alcohol looks vastly different than what Jesus desires our relationship to look, okay? In some ways, in our region here, alcohol is as enslaving as some of the hard drugs we've seen. We're more socially accepting of it, but it was both a gift given to us by God and it's deeply perverted by sin and turns into alcoholism and addiction and abuse. And so I want to encourage you to go read that this week. I don't have time to do justice to it today, so I'm not even going to try. Here's what I can tell you, as I just did. It was made by God to glorify God, to delight as a good gift, and it is to be taken with caution and a hope that everything we do, whether we eat or whether we drink, it would all be done to bring glory to God. And so that's the question that we have to wrestle with. The article, I think, does that well. If you have other questions, please feel free to reach out to us. But so Jesus converts water into wine. The other thing we don't see Jesus doing is sitting in the corner, pouting at this wedding, which I think men have a tendency to do more than our ladies do. I think for some reason when men don't get their way, we just kind of like, we pout, we don't talk, we don't communicate. But I've seen a lot of pastors show up at weddings, do the wedding, and then either leave. Sometimes I'll have to leave, I can't go to the reception, but not in protest. But I've seen guys leave in protest, or they get to the ceremony and they're like judging the groomsmen who don't know Jesus, that they're celebrating hard for their buddy, and like they're just sitting there in this like hard pout, like we don't dance, we don't have a beer, how dare you enjoy yourself? Like we see something amazing about our God. He created marriage, he created laughter, and he created this celebration. And he's here allowing them to partake of this celebration. I don't know that he drank at this wedding, nothing tells us, but we do know at the Last Supper he was sitting around a table with a glass of wine, instituting communion. But there's more going on here. I think the other thing I find very fascinating about Jesus at this celebration and engaging in this way is that Jesus' entire disciples here are looking on, watching how he's going to handle it. And Jesus is looking at this man's social dilemma, right? Like I said before, we have a tendency to rebel from any social pressure that comes across. Well, I'll wear jeans. Don't tell me I can't wear jeans. I'm wearing jeans, right? Don't tell me I have to whisper. I'm talking loud. Like, forget you. You know what I mean? Like, we have all these ways in which we rebel from any kind of social stigma in our life because we don't like the pressure. And Jesus could just have easily said, guys, this is stupid. Obviously, the guy's not a bajillionaire. We've been going for 5 days already into our 7, right? We ran out of wine. Get over it, right? Like at our wedding, we didn't have any hard liquor. We were a little nervous about it getting a little out of control. So we just had beer. And by the time the night was finished, all the like normal beer was drank. I think we only had some like weird, I think it was like a Mexican beer. It was like lemon flavored. Like it was horrible. It was horrible. You talk about like rolling out the bad wine last so that nobody notices. Nobody cared. But like we ran out of beer. We were like, we didn't even care. We were having such a good time. Marlene and I forgot to even eat. We didn't even care. So what? We ran out of beer, drank water. I don't care, right? That's part of the rebelliousness in me, right? But Jesus doesn't say that. He's not like, this is a weird social stigma. You don't need to put this pressure on them, and doesn't get up and give a sermon. He enters in to the pressure and the pain that this bridegroom would have felt. Some of us feel like some of our problems are silly and not worth God's time. Like, I'm not going to bring that to God. I'm not going to pray. I'm not going to turn, like, it's just anxiety over something stupid. Or, it's my job. I just have this annoying boss. Like, I don't care. Or like, it's our finances. It's not that big a deal. Like, why would I bring that and bother God with it? And Jesus invites us to bother him. He's like, bother me. I care about your weird cultural, social stigmas. That doesn't exist in 2025. Like, no one's going to shame you and your masculinity because you ran out of beer at your wedding. Nobody cares. They might grumble, they might leave early and go to the Toasted Monkey. I don't know what they're gonna do, but you won't not live this down for the rest of your life. No one's gonna question your ability to provide and care for your wife for the rest of your life. This is a specific point in time in a specific region of the world amongst a specific people, and it's this weird social stigma, and Jesus enters into it. He cares enough about this person to go, I'll help him out here. And he doesn't just eke him over the line. He does so in quality and in abundance. This is the God that we worship. A God who cares about the little details of your life, enters into those moments and solves the problem overwhelmingly, abundantly, because he loves you. It may not always be the way you think it should happen or in the timing you think, but he is not distant and he does not care. He invites you to bring even your shallowest and silliest of problems to him because they're not silly to him. Don't ever run away from God because you feel like your problems aren't big enough to bother him with, or feel like you need to go to like one of his angels or like a dead human, and we call them saints, like go pray to your grandma or something and be like, well, Jesus is busy, I'll pray to grandma. First off, spoiler alert, grandma cannot hear you, okay? We find out very quickly that dead people are not, they don't get wings, they don't turn into angels. All that's like weird Valentine's Day theology. I'm gonna make fun of it here next year too. Again, every year I just make fun of Valentine's Day the same way. But at the end of the day, bring your problems to the one who has the power to solve them and who loves you more than grandma and wants to bring a solution. Come to him. He cares. He cares. Now, something even deeper is happening. He doesn't tell them to get the wine jars. He tells them to get the purification jars. Once again, we have a very interesting cultural thing going on here. The Jewish people became obsessed with ritualistic purification. Like washing your hands in their culture was not just about being a germaphobe, right? It was about being clean before God. And so the more you could ritually purify yourself in every instance, the more you looked clean amongst the culture before God. And it was all external. It was all external. In fact, at one point, Jesus is gonna, I think it's in the book of Matthew, he's gonna confront the religious leaders because he's gonna say, you clean the outside, but on the inside, you're disgusting. It'd be like watching somebody wash like their coffee mug and they just like wash the outside and the handle and like the inside's like 3-day-old coffee, like the cream is curdled, like, can I make it any grosser? Like there's mold growing in it, this is what Jesus confronts them because they were obsessed with this ritualistic purification and forgot that it was meant to be symbolic of God cleansing their heart. And so Jesus takes these purification jars that had been they were instituted by God with the Hebrew people, but they kind of took it to an extreme that he never intended, and again, missed the purpose of it. It was about symbolizing, as you wash the outside, realize the inside's even dirtier. As you wash the dirt from your feet and from your hands, let this be an act of worship that stirs up your heart to realize my inside needs cleaned, but I can't get to the inside. I can't drink bleach. How do I clean my heart? And God goes, me. I'll clean the heart. And so he takes these ritualistic purification jars, says, fill them all the way up, and then uses these to institute something profound. Something we see, as I mentioned earlier, at the Last Supper. As Jesus sits with his 12 disciples, we see him enjoying his final meal before he would go to a cross. Don't start peeling off the things yet. I know it takes you like a half an hour, but just wait. I'm going to come back up after the worship team and we'll partake after this. But He's taking this celebration, and he takes the bread, he breaks, he says, this is my body. And then he takes the cup and he says, this is the cup of my blood. It represents a new promise, a new covenant between me and you. A covenant of forgiveness of sins, where law is no longer the requirement, but grace is the requirement. Where ritualistic purification is no longer what we celebrate, but gospel heart transformation. And so before we even get to the Last Supper, way at the end of this story, we find Jesus at a wedding, celebrating with these people, entering into their pain, and then introducing a new way of life. No more ritualistic purifications. No more worrying about the outside of the cup. Let's worry about the inside of the cup. I'm changing this water that's used for ritual, external, religious acts. And I want to show you that I will change the old way and usher in a new promise and a new covenant where I will purify the inner soul, the inner heart. And for the Hebrew people, wine was symbolic of blessing and joy. Amos and Joel, I think, and Isaiah all talk about God bringing about this day when he would usher in, and the people would farm the fields and they would produce a great blessing and the wine would flow. It was this understanding of celebration and God's blessing and God's goodness. And he's saying, you have been under these ritualistic purification rites and all this social pressure and all this religious activity, and it's done nothing to cleanse your heart. But I will usher in a new promise that cleanses you perfectly. And in that new promise will come this abundant joy, this celebration, and this goodness. And it won't just be a little bit, it'll be overflowing. More than you could ever imagine partaking of. And this is what we see happening at the wedding at Cana. A foreshadowing of the one-day wedding supper of the Lamb, when Jesus would come back to retrieve his bride. He calls us to be ready in that moment for when he comes back. Unknowing, just like the brides would be in those days, not sure when it would happen. We're told nobody knows the time and date when Jesus would return. And anyone who tells you otherwise is going to wind up on TV and look very foolish on whatever date they predict. But we don't know. And Jesus is coming. And he's going to come back and he's going to retrieve his bride, the church. And the new covenant, this new promise, this grace will usher us in to a place of joy and celebration that will never end. In an abundance we could never fathom and never imagine. So I don't know if you have been holding off coming to Jesus. Maybe coming to Jesus for the first time. Maybe coming to Jesus with your petty problems because that's what you think of them as. But his invitation is to come. And his invitation is to partake of the celebration because Jesus loves to laugh. He enters into your tears and he enters into your celebration and he enters in to make your problems his problems and invite you to turn your problems over to him. Sometimes it goes as we need it to, and sometimes it goes exactly as we need it to, but never imagined it would go that way. And in his invitation is an invitation to do away with religious activity, external religious nonsense. It looks spiritual. It always does. Whenever you have to spin around 3 times and not eat on a certain day and jump on one leg and stand or sit or kneel and do all these weird things, you're like, oh, look, it feels really spiritual. But over and over and over again, Scripture is going to confront this idea that there's a way that seems right to man. And it usually looks like these kinds of weird religious, what I would almost call, I won't say it, but it almost looks not superficial. I'm missing my word here. Superstitious, thank you. It almost looks superstitious, but it feels really religious. Like, obviously, I have to jump through all these hoops to get to God. Obviously, that's how we please God. How can we please God if there's not some weird spiritual combination we have to unlock with our outward moral actions? Does it make any sense? Jesus says, no. This new covenant that I will shed my blood for is that you might come. It's a promise of grace that overthrows the old way and invites you to come covered in the blood of Christ, who washes away your sin, removes your guilt as you stand before a holy God, promises you can come into the light without shame because you are loved, and then adopts you as sons and daughters into his family, all under the umbrella of this new covenant he ushers in through his blood. So